Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's council meeting. I'm Councillor Frances Eyre, Mayor of Nillumbik, and I welcome all of those who are here in the gallery and those watching at home. And so we'll start the meeting, so welcome. Members of the public are advised the meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the live stream recording will be made publicly available on YouTube and Council's website. Nillumbik Shire Council respectfully acknowledges the Wurundjeri Wurrung people as the traditional owners of the country on which Nillumbik is located. And we value the significance of the Wurundjeri people's history as essential to the unique character of the Shire. We pay tribute to all First Nations people living in Nillumbik, give respect to elders past, present and future, and extend that respect to all First Nations people. We respect the enduring strength and the Wurundjeri Wurrung and acknowledge the ongoing impacts of past traumas and injustices from European invasion, massacres and genocide committed against First Nations people. We acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. Wurundjeri Wurrung people hold a deep and ongoing connection to this place. We value the distinctive place of our First Nations people in both Nillumbik and Australians' identity, from their cultural heritage and care of the land and waterways to their ongoing contributions in many fields, including academia, agriculture, arts, economics, law, sports and politics, to list a few. I'll now ask Councillor Duffy to read the Good Governance Pledge.
Thank you, Mayor. As councillors, we are mindful of our civic responsibilities and obligations. We pledge to take them seriously and to carry them out with diligence and integrity. We know the decisions we take will affect the people and environment of Nillumbik, now and in the future. We undertake, therefore, to make sound and principled decisions of lasting value in a spirit of fairness and for the good of all. We also pledge to serve the needs and well-being of the community and the environment in an open and honest manner and to the best of our abilities.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Now I'd like to introduce Betsy Deer, Chair of the Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Nillumbik. The Nillumbik Baha'i community originated in the mid-1970s in what was then known as the Diamond Valley Shire. After amalgamation with Eltham Shire, the Nillumbik Baha'i community formed in the mid-1980s. The community comprises of 33 adults and 8 children, ranging in age from 6 months to 80 years, from diverse backgrounds including Australia, America, Malaysia, Mexican, Turkish and Iranian. They have no clergy and elect 9 adult believers to form an assembly annually to administer the affairs of the community. Consultation is an essential key in the decision-making process, as no one is considered lesser or greater than the other. Over the years, the Nillumbik Baha'i community has been involved in numerous local activities. They have operated information stalls in the Diamond Creek Fair and the Eltham Town Fair, and held activities during Refugee Week and Reconciliation Week. They have run a devotional program for many years with Plenty Valley FM radio station, and even won a Gomi Award, and also taught Baha'i religious education for many years in local primary schools. Bahai's aim is to celebrate diversity while living harmoniously in the human family. I introduce Betsy.
In acknowledgement of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which Nillumbik stands, I pay my respects to the Wurundjeri elders, past and present. So I share this prayer from the Baha'i writings, which is known as Blessed is the Spot, and I share it in both Wurrung and English. And to me, it's the epitome of what Nillumbik is, and how beautiful it is. Bamburin mani, ba Willem, ba Mogoli, ba Willem deba, ba Duron, ba narak, ba munmungik, ba merinjakoren, ba dangorm, ba big, ba waring, ba bawal, ba banum, durnback, dumbananyin, bunjil maman, oh burned up, dumananyin, bunjil maman. Blessed is the spot and the house and the place and the city and the heart and the mountain and the refuge and the cave and the valley and the land and the sea and the island and the meadow where mention of God hath been made and his praise glorified. And now I'd like to share this prayer, which is for a governing body, and you are the governors of Nillumbik Shire, and we offer this prayer from Abdul Baha in the Baha'i writings for the councillors, the members here. O my God, O thou who endowest every just power and equitable dominion with abiding glory and everlasting might, with permanence and stability, with constancy and honor, aid thou by thy heavenly grace every government that acteth justly towards its subjects, and every sovereign authority derived from thee, that shieldeth the poor and weaketh under the banner of its protection. I beseech thee, by thy divine grace and surpassing bounty, to aid this just government, the canopy of whose authority is spread over vast and mighty lands, and the evidences of those whose justice are apparent in its prosperous and flourishing regions. Assist, O my God, its hosts, raise aloft its ensigns, bestow influence upon its word and its utterance, protect its lands, increase its honor, spread its fame, reveal its signs, and unfurl the banner through thine all-subduing power and thy resplendent might in the kingdom of creation. Thou verily aidest whomsoever thou willest, and thou verily art the Almighty, the most powerful.
Thank you, Betsy, and for sharing with us some Warralong language as well. Thank you. I'll now move on to apologies.
Happy to move the motion
Thank you.
that the apology from Councillor Karen Egan be noted.
Do I have a seconder for the motion? Thanks, Councillor Stockman. All those in favour of accepting? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We do move on to confirmation of minutes. Councillor Stockman, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move the motion that accepts the officer's recommendation that Council confirms the minutes of the Council meeting held on Tuesday the 26th of April 2022, Attachment 1, subject to the following amendment. The outcome of the vote on CM.031/22-Climate Action Plan 2022 to 2032 on page 19 of the attached minutes, Attachment 1, to read carried in lieu of carried unanimously.
Thank you, Councillor Stockman. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Payne. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Ask councillors if you have any conflicts of interest. to any matter arising tonight. And if during the evening's meeting, if it should come to you that you do have a conflict, please raise it at the time of the report being put forward. We do not have any positions, so I'll now move on to questions from the gallery. For the benefits of gallery and members of the public, the procedure and sequence for dealing with questions with a question is that the chairperson shall name the questioner and inquire if they are present in the gallery. And this is before a question is read out. Is Anne Nielsen here? Okay. I'm unable to read her question. Carlotta Quinlan? Thank you. Question 1. All organisations, including councils, will have needed to develop new and flexible arrangements to continue functioning effectively in this new COVID environment, particularly with relation to staffing. With regard to the planning department staff, both strategic and statutory planners, Eltham Community Action Group asks the following questions. How many planners in FTE terms are employed at Nillumbik, and since December 2019, how many new planners has Nillumbik Shire Council employed, including full-time, part-time and temporary planners? And the response is, Planning Services has 13 FTE, which is full-time employment statutory planners, inclusive of 2 coordinators. Since December 2019, 10 planners have been employed at Nillumbik. The Strategic Planning Department has a total of 5.4 FTE, with 1 FTE remaining vacant since January 2022. Since December 2019, 3 strategic planners and 1 new urban design planner have been employed at council. And question 2 from Carlotta. Given that new staff will have worked from home because of lockdowns, personal choice and imposed contract requirements, it is possible that some planners may be making decisions without adequate appreciation of the unique characteristics of the area and even without ever having visited the actual review site. Residents are concerned that decisions may be made that are inappropriate for Eltham and Nillumbik. And question 2, what forms of induction and mentoring have taken place to ensure that new staff are aware of the different areas within Nillumbik and the cultural and historical reasons for the particular neighbourhood characters that distinguish our areas from other Melbourne local government areas, including other Greenwich Shires? And the response is, all new staff are required to undertake training as part of their induction when commencing their position with council. This training includes a bus tour of the Shire, which showcases both the physical green wedge and constructed areas of the Shire. Depending on the position held by staff, ongoing training is offered by team members specific to that area, which does not account for the unique aspects and characteristics of Nillumbik to enable staff to perform their tasks effectively. Thank you for those questions. We'll now move on to reports of advisory committees.
I'm happy to move that.
Thank you, Councillor
Thank you,
Duffy.
That council notes the minutes of the following advisory committee meetings. As per attachment 1, reported be noted. 1, inclusion and access advisory committee meeting held on the 25th of February 2022. The positive ageing advisory committee held on the 1st of April 2022, and the Youth Council formal advisory committee meeting on the 4th of April 2022. Second, notes the minutes of the positive ageing advisory committee meeting held on the 4th of March 2022, referenced in attachment 1, with amendments to chair, attendees, apologies, amendment to mover and seconder of the minutes, and amendments to items discussed at roundtable and to the actions in items 7 and 9. There were some errors in the minutes that were put forward in the previous. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say that. That comes later. I'll keep reading the motion. Point 4, request officers to update attachment 1 on the public website accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Thanks, Councillor Payne. Would you like to speak to that motion?
Thank you. Just to note that point 2 is really just procedural here. There were some errors made in the minutes that were put forward at the last opportunity, and that the draft has been changed so that the minutes in this report are correct. The one thing that I would like to say again is just that our advisory committee is doing a fabulous job. I have the privilege of being involved with the Positive Ageing Advisory Committee, the Health and Wellbeing Committee and the Youth Council, which I get a lot of joy from. In terms of the Positive Ageing Committee at the last meeting, there were 2 motions that were put forward by the committee where they're wanting to draw things to council's attention, which council will take on note. One was looking at, in line with current community standards and expectations, the Positive Ageing Committee recommends to council that residents and community group inquiries by telephone and email are responded to within 5 working days. Currently, we have a different service level agreement for that. So council will consider that, and that was more of an operational matter. So we won't be talking about that at today's meeting. And the second item that the subcommittee in Positive Ageing put forward was looking at terminology. So, you know, the Positive Ageing Committee recommends to Nillumbik Council the importance of consistency of language when official publications and notifications are published and distributed. I'm speaking on behalf of the committee here where I'm reading out their motion. We make specific reference to terminology used when referring to mature age residents in our shire. For example, Older Persons Advocacy Network, Age with Rights Publications consistently uses the term older people in all of its publications and correspondence. So the Positive Ageing Committee prefers older person or older people is the terminology that Nillumbik uses in our publications. So this is the work of our subcommittees. They do put forward valuable information and their lived experience and their professional experience. So this is what's coming from the Positive Ageing Committee as to how they would like us to consider talking about older people in our community. One quick thing that I'd like to say about the Youth Council is that, you know, at the last council meeting, we had a new youth mayor and a new youth deputy mayor appointed, which was fabulous to, you know, have those people take on those roles to lead the community and to see them in the days since taking on formal duties with council at our public ceremonies. So congratulations to Brianna and to Kira, who have taken on those roles. And the very exciting thing that's happening tomorrow with the advisory committee is that the youth are putting on a youth summit. So the first time we've had that happen here in Nillumbik. And so a big thank you to Corinne Nichols and the community services team for facilitating that with the Youth Council as one of the objectives of that council in how they can contribute to our community. So, you know, these advisory groups are full of information, full of good advice, and I love seeing the action that comes from them. So with that, I'll hand over to anybody else that might like to speak about advisory committees. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Duffy. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Okay, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. We'll now move to CM 043/22, the adoption of budget. Thanks, Councillor Ramtran.
Yes, it's a very long motion, so I will just move it as per the papers, several pages.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ramtran. I might just actually read the title out because I only said it shortly. It's Adoption of Budget 2022 to 2023, Declaration of Rates and Charges and Council Plan and the Annual Action Plan for the same year, 2022 to 23. Would you like, so do I have a seconder for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Payne. Councillor Ramtran, would you like to speak?
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge all of those who submitted to the budget. We did get some really valuable feedback. None of that has necessarily been integrated into the document itself, but it's all been taken on board, all of the requests that were made to us. I think they probably weren't necessarily appropriate for this budget. For example, requesting a community hall in Bend of Islands is the sort of thing that would be done in a much later budget cycle, but at least we can take on board that there's a community interest in that. More funding for community support. Again, it's the sort of thing that we can't really address through this budget. We need more of a strategic idea behind it first, but certainly something that we will think more about how council can be more involved in that space. And of course also the suggestion of purchasing additional land for public space and biodiversity. Again, it's not something that ought to be addressed by this budget itself, but we do have a number of projects coming up next year, including the biodiversity strategy, which is funded by this budget, and it's through work like that that we can consider that in a more broad strategic sense and look at those sorts of things. So while we did have submissions and we didn't necessarily change the budget itself, all of that feedback was taken on board, and I just want to assure people that we are listening. And budget consultations always are very complex, and it's difficult to make significant changes to a moving budget, but that doesn't mean council doesn't take on board what's been said. We also have a range of very positive initiatives in this budget. So just to name a few, we've got our biodiversity strategy, as I said before, which is a significant funding towards that, and that initiative will see a full review of our biodiversity strategy, which is already a very strong, well-written strategy that covers a whole lot of points, but it was written to address the old Victorian biodiversity strategy. We now have a new one at a state level, which is a huge improvement on the previous one, and hopefully we'll be able to write a biodiversity strategy for Nillumbik that really responds to the new state government's biodiversity strategy. So that'll be a big piece of work. We've also got funding to look into measures to protect the urban tree canopy in urban areas, funding for a neighbourhood character strategy, again to protect those more urban areas and find ways of really or find out what the neighbourhood character is there so that we can preserve that in the future through planning controls. We've got funding for our climate action plan, both for internal implementation and also for climate-related infrastructure. And that's just a few of the really important projects that we've got happening in this financial year, thanks to this budget. So I'm really pleased with what we've got here in front of us. We have stayed within the rate cap. So we're following the state government's rate cap for where we're putting the rates to, and we have seen an increase in the waste management charge, which is the result of, unfortunately, the need for a number of councils, and it's not just us, but a number of councils who have to cap their old landfills, which we now have to do in kangaroo ground. The cost of doing that has gone up because the cost of soil has increased more than was planned for. And that's sort of fallen to us to address. So we're minimising the impact on the community as much as we can. But I'm really interested in what comes after this, and once we have actually rehabilitated that kangaroo ground landfill, what can we do with that land next? And I really look forward to hearing from the community about what we do with it post-rehabilitation, because we could have public open space, solar farm, trails, bush conservation, whatever might work there. That'll be a bigger piece of work, and I'm really looking forward to getting a good outcome with that. So I'm happy with the budget we've got here today, and happy to move the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ramcharan. Councillor Payne, would you like to speak? Would any other councillors like to speak? Thank you, Councillor Duffy.
Thank you. Just very briefly, thank you for putting the budget together. As a collaborative effort, there's been community input with this, and it has been put together with, the community consultation that happened with Our People, Our Place, Our Future, all of those things have kind of gone into helping us shape the type of activities that we want to have as a council and our action plan, our priorities. I'd just like to point out to the community, in looking at the budget, on page 9, there is a really great pie graph that talks about for every $100 of rates, where council allocates that money towards. So, for example, $16 goes into waste and recycling, $15 goes into footpaths, $7 goes into library education and culture. So we all know that council is not just roads, rates and rubbish. It's the community services that really go to the heart and soul of what we do, and that was evident at last week's community volunteer event that we had. It was great to hear the impact that council has on the lives of those who volunteer and how they feel about what they can contribute to our community through their volunteering. So there is a lot that goes into a budget, and I don't want to talk about all of the items, but on a high level, I'd just like to say that, as a council, in our budget, we have $60 million worth of rates. That money's come from Wurundjeri land. The Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people are the traditional owners of the land that we live and work and play on here in Nillumbik. And I think that it's just really important for us to be mindful that in all that we do, we need to be mindful that this is not, this land is unceded, and it's National Reconciliation Week this week. So I'd just like us to make sure that what we do is keeping the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung in our minds with all of the things that we do with the money that we earn from the land that was traditionally theirs.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Any other councillors wish to speak? Okay, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Now move to Council Plan Quarterly Performance Report 2021 to 2022, Quarter 3. Councillor Perkins, would you like to move the motion?
Thank you. I'll move the motion as per the papers that Council notes and receives the Council Plan Quarterly Performance Report for the third quarter of 21-22.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Ramcharan. Councillor Perkins, do you wish to speak?
Look, just very briefly, it's almost full administratively, or administrative. It's the council plan is on track. All actions are either on track or complete, and just like to congratulate staff for their ongoing work.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Councillor Ramcharan, would you like to speak? Any other councillors wishing to speak?
Yes, just one quick point. Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to draw the attention to item 4.L in the officer report, and just congratulate the Capital Works team and all of the people that have been involved in delivering the huge projects that have happened. The Diamond Valley Sports and Fitness Centre, $16+ million. The Diamond Creek Trail Extension, $9+ million. The Diamond Creek Netball Courts, $800,000, and lots of other programs. And the thing that we're seeing at the moment is the joy that the community has from being able to use these places. So whether it's, the young kids down at the Diamond Creek Netball courts and the pavilion that have been, 37 years in the advocacy for, or whether it's the Diamond Valley Sports and Fitness Centre and, using the gym, or whether it's the badminton, or whether it's even just the people that are there for basketball, and the excitement of the basketball community at the moment as they see the stadium seating being built and put into place is really great. So I'd just like to say thank you to the team who make all of this happen. So I have said that, so I'll go back to you.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Any other councillors wishing to speak? I'll also mention the Nillumbik Youth Strategy has progressed as well. And as Councillor Duffy mentioned earlier, we've got the Youth Summit and exploring mental health services as an example. So I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. We'll now move to the 2022 Annual Community Survey results.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to move the motion that Council 1 receives and notes the results of the 2022 Annual Community Survey Final Report as per Attachment 1, and 2 makes the report's findings available to the public on Council's website.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Stockman. Councillor Payne, do you wish to speak?
Just to thank Jeremy Livingston and James Hartigan and team for the work they've done in compiling this report, as well as Metropolis Research. The report itself has suffered the vagaries of COVID, of course. They had to use telephone dialing instead of face-to-face, which changes the results. However, the results stand. The top 5 important issues are in order: road maintenance and repairs, traffic management, environment, conservation and climate change, bushfire management and prevention, and rates. So we have that message loud and clear, and I would like to thank everyone that did agree to take part. 6,500 phone calls and about 150 people that did bravely answer the survey results. So once again, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Councillor Stockman, do you wish to speak? No? Any other councillors? All right, I'll put the motion to the vote. Oh, Councillor Duffy.
Sorry, and I promise I won't talk very much. I just wanted to draw out on page 221, in the survey we look at gender, and there is also looking at LGBTIQA+. It's great to be able to be getting data on this, and without this sort of information we aren't able to use evidence in a lot of our planning. But I'm wanting to draw the attention to this to say that, with these surveys, action does come, and from our health and wellbeing advisory, our health and wellbeing plan, all of these things tie in. And one of the great joys for council last week was the flying of the rainbow flag for the very first time here at Nillumbik. We were one of a number of councils within Victoria to do so, and it's the first time for us to be able to symbolically say, we are a safe place to be part of the LGBTIQA+ community. So I just wanted to make sure that at our council meeting we acknowledge that, and again the work of Corinne Nichols and the community services team to see that happen. So thank you, Corinne, and also thank you, Carl, for the fabulous opportunity for the staff and councillors to be able to hear from the Commissioner for the Victoria's LGBTQI Commissioner last week with that as well. So whilst we've got these surveys with results that are just kind of numbers, this all translates into action and heart and activity for the community. So it looks dry and boring here as a piece of paper, but when you look at what's actually happening in reality, they're very real things that have tangible benefits and meaning for people. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Duffy. Councillor Perkins.
I might just make a couple of comments, because Councillor Duffy reminded me of the different lenses that sometimes we view these reports, and my lens will be explained in a moment. Of all the areas in Nillumbik, representation, lobbying, advocacy on behalf of community by precinct was highest in Diamond Creek, believe it or not. Maintaining community trust and confidence by precinct, again, Diamond Creek. Making decisions in the best interests of community by precinct, Diamond Creek, were the clear winners there. Supporting healthy local community by precinct, Diamond Creek again. Satisfaction with the design of public spaces, Diamond Creek led there. Satisfaction with the protection of local heritage, Diamond Creek led in the survey results. Safety walking residential streets by precinct, Diamond Creek was the clear leader. Safety walking beside main roads by precinct, again, Diamond Creek were out front. Safety cycling in residential streets by precinct, Diamond Creek. Protection of safety in public areas in Nillumbik during the day by precinct, Diamond Creek. Perception of safety travelling on or waiting for public transport by precinct, you guessed it.
That was Eltham, yeah?
No, Diamond Creek.
Oh, I thought
There was probably Eltham was probably
Eltham.
mentioned in the survey, but I didn't capture it. Made changes to your home or lifestyle to help reduce climate change by precinct, Diamond Creek led there. Ability to cope with climate-related risks and impacts by precinct, Diamond Creek. Financial wellbeing, coping with COVID-19 by precinct, Diamond Creek. So there were a few results that I found interesting. There were a few that Diamond Creek didn't lead, but it's just a bit of a snapshot of some of the survey questions and results. And I'm a little bit biased, but it was overall a good response from people in Diamond Creek. So it was good. Thank you.
Any other councillors wishing to speak? I'd like to make note that there are other people in the Shire other than those that live in Diamond Creek, and that they did participate in the survey and are just as happy and well connected in. So thank you for that. All right, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried unanimously. We'll now move on to the draft Municipal Planning Strategy, MPS, Phase 3 engagement. Councillor Ramcharan, thank you.
Yes, I'd like to move that Council 1 notes the draft Municipal Planning Strategy, MPS, Attachment 2, and draft Clause 74.02 for the strategic work in Attachment 3, endorses a third round of engagement for the MPS, which will exhibit the draft MPS in Attachment 2 and draft Clause 74.02 in Attachment 3, which is scheduled to be conducted from early June to mid-July 2022 for a period of 6 weeks. And 3, notes a report will be presented to an upcoming meeting of Council's Planning and Consultation Committee, which will consider the response to this round of engagement.
Thank you, Councillor Ramcharan. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Thanks, Councillor Payne. Councillor Ramcharan?
Yes, well, look, we had a huge response to the consultation on the MPS. Massive number of submissions, a lot of them quite in detail. And it took a very, very long time to get through all of that. But one thing that really stood out to me when we got the report from officers on this at a briefing earlier this month was just how incredibly well they had dissected the responses from the community. And I really want to commend the strategic planning team for filtering out every single comment that was made and responding to each one individually and explaining either why it was included or why it couldn't be included or why we chose not to include it. That was a huge, huge document that they ended up producing. But I did get through it in the end, and it was certainly worth it because it gave me some a really solid understanding of how the community had been responded to in putting the MPS together. And I think what we've ended up with is an incredibly well-written MPS. It is clear, it's to the point, and it also really talks to the values of Nillumbik being the Green Ledge Shire. So I'm looking forward to hearing the community's feedback on this first draft. And of course, this is another round of consultation that we're doing now, so people will still have a chance to comment on it, and we will have chance to make changes if people aren't entirely happy with it. But it is an incredibly important document. It really sets the vision and sets the scene for planning in Nillumbik. It sits within the planning scheme, and it really does form the basis of strategic work that gets done in Nillumbik. It doesn't get changed often, so it's really important that we get this right. The other thing we're doing here is we're reviewing Clause 74.02 of the planning scheme, which has to be reviewed every 4 years. So it's up for review this year, and the decision was made to lump that in with the review of the MPS. The reason being that the input that we got from the community for that first round of the MPS was very much relevant to Clause 74.02. And while a lot of it couldn't be included in the draft NPS, it could be included in that 74.02. So by combining them together, we've been able to take a lot of that feedback on board. And we're still able to consult on 74.02 because that's going out to the community now for this further round of consultation. So what is Clause 74.02? It's effectively a to-do list that sits within the planning scheme. It lists further strategic work that the council needs to undertake, and that will form sort of a work plan for our strategic planners in coming years. So any further strategic work, one thing that came up quite often in the community responses was environmentally sustainable development for new buildings, so requiring new buildings to have solar and double glazing and insulation, etc. And that would require further strategic work. So that's why we've put it into that Clause 74.02, so that it's sitting there on our to-do list, and hopefully we'll be able to get around to that and make it happen in coming years. So again, that is a very important part of the planning scheme, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the community about whether they think that we've got that one right. There may be calls to put other things in there, to take certain things out, to swap things over. We're absolutely still able to do that during this round of consultation, and then after that it will be going to a more formal planning process where we will be seeking for a planning scheme amendment to integrate both of these documents into our planning scheme. But I think it is important that we go out for this final round of consultation first, so we can make sure that we really do hear from the community.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Payne, would you like to speak?
Just to echo Councillor Amtaran's comments about a really well-written and succinct and concise MPS, trying to capture the values of any shire in 5,000 words is a very tough gig, and they have done that. We know it lays out who and where we are, what happens with the land use, and how we want to make it happen. And I congratulate the team for the hard work. It's not over yet, but this is a great draft. So thank you very much.
Any other councillors wishing to speak? Right, okay. I'll also just point out that there's purple writing actually in there which will be removed, but it's really good because it helps visualise or see where the information has come from. Like, for instance, on page clause 0.01, it says here, Nillumbik Economic Development Strategy. So you can see that information's been inputted from that, and that's throughout the document. Obviously the purple wording will be removed before it's put in final version, but it just shows how many strategies and policies have been reviewed to form this document. I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. We'll now move on to the Future of Agriculture in Nillumbik Action Plan. Thanks, Councillor Amtran.
Yes, I've got a slightly alternate motion to move. So I'd like to move that Council 1 endorses the Future of Agriculture in Nillumbik Action Plan in Attachment 1, subject to the removal of Objective 5. 2, requests officers to begin implementation of the action plan from July 2022. 3, requests that officers provide a copy of the action plan on Council's website. 4, requests that officers provide an annual update on the action plan as part of the economic development strategy. And 5, requests that officers notify submitters to Future of Agriculture project of Council's resolution.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Would you like to speak, Councillor Amtran?
Yes, thank you. Look, a huge amount of consultation was conducted on this one. It was quite a significant effort. So a letter was sent out to residents across all the rural areas of the Shire, which is not cheap, as many of us would know from campaigning in those in certain areas. It costs a lot to post letters out to everyone, but a letter was sent out to all residents in those rural areas to get an idea of what agriculture looks like in Nillumbik and what we can do as a council to support that. So it was a huge consultation, and there was a huge amount of feedback from residents, which was really good to see. What that's led to is two things. So though it was conducted in parallel with a research project that assessed the viability of land across the Shire, and we've actually been able to produce maps that show what can be grown in different areas, what sort of crops are viable, what crops are not viable, where should you grow this, where should you not grow this, etc. So that, I hope, will be a really useful thing for promoting agriculture where it's appropriate. The second piece of work that's come out of this is the action plan, and that's what we're endorsing here today. So the action plan brings together actions that probably already existed in other council plans, but it brings them together and puts them as a priority of the economic development team. It is a relatively small document, and really what it achieves is it highlights the actions that we can take to really promote and assist agriculture in the Green Wedge. But it really is only based on things that council was already doing. And that comes out of this research study that's been done. So that's how that was put together. The one point there, removal of Objective 5 from the action plan. So Objective 5 in the action plan was to lobby the state government to change certain planning rules in our rural conservation zone to enable agriculture without a permit in the rural conservation zone. So I'm proposing to remove that. The rural conservation zone is very separate from the green wedge zone. Within the green wedge zone, you can conduct a wide range of agriculture without a permit. But in the rural conservation zone, you cannot. That's a Victorian planning provision. We have control over our local planning provisions. We do not have control over the Victorian planning provisions. That is the state government's jurisdiction. So by lobbying the state government to change that, what we would be doing is we would be changing the rules in rural conservation zones across the whole state. And I'd like to think that other councils who also apply the rural conservation zone probably wouldn't be too happy with the idea of those planning rules being changed. The rural conservation zone is selected with very good reason on a strategic basis, and part of that zone is that you need a permit to farm. It doesn't mean you can't farm. We absolutely support farming where it's appropriate, and I'd like to think that if somebody came along and wanted to set up an agriculture project within the rural conservation zone, we'd do everything we could to really assist them to get that right. But it needs to be controlled by permits. A real advantage of permits within the rural conservation zone, especially for agriculture, is that part of that can be a land management plan. If there's no permit requirement, you can't put together a land management plan. A land management plan can outline certain requirements on a farmer to make sure that they're managing the land appropriately, improving, looking after the soil health, growing appropriate crops there, not growing crops that are going to turn into environmental weeds. And also, because we get a lot of hobby farmers, some of whom have never been involved in agriculture before, and that's not to say that none of our residents know about agriculture. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who are really quite skilled in that area, but we do get a number of hobby farmers who move into the area and try to set up a farm. And a land management plan can actually be really helpful for them because it can outline the certain things that they can do to improve their success rate. So I actually think it benefits everybody to have that permit requirement within the rural conservation zone. And on top of that, I think the main reason really, it is critical to protecting what we've got here in Nillumbik, which is biodiversity, and the rural conservation zone has its primary purpose as conservation, and will allow agriculture where it's appropriate, but it must be appropriate, and that's why we've got a permit requirement. Right on time.
Thank you, Councillor Ramcharan. Definitely right on time. Would you like to speak, Councillor Perkins?
Thank you, Mary. Yes, I really only seconded this motion for the purposes of discussion, but after listening to Councillor Ramcharan, I'm very much in support of it. I think he's put the matters very well. The removal, I would have otherwise supported the officer recommendation, but I think Councillor Ramcharan makes a lot of sense in terms of removing Objective 5. I'll read out Objective 5. And that's advocate the state government to alter planning controls to allow landholders a right to farm on pre-cleared agricultural land in the rural conservation zone, ensuring decision guidelines to avoid damage to surrounding environment. I do now agree it is appropriate to remove that. The rural conservation zone should not be weakened by this council, and although there is a link to the Green Wedge Management Plan, I recall that was a very contentious document. As it went through, it was a 4-3 split. There was a large minority of councillors that were not happy, and I was one of them, was not happy with that objective in the Green Wedge Management Plan. So I'm more than happy to support Councillor Ramcharan now, and I'd urge other councillors to do so likewise. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Perkins. Would any other councillors like to speak to this? Thanks, Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Mayor. Between the 2nd of August and the 12th of September last year, there was a 6-week community consultation period, which was open, inviting the people of Nillumbik to answer survey questions via the Nillumbik Shire Council's website, the Participate page, and it was about the future of agriculture in Nillumbik. It also states on the page that there will be a number of opportunities for the community to contribute to and participate in the research which has happened. I agree with Councillor Ramcharan's removal of Objective 5, but hearing community views is important to me, and I'm aware that our community has not had the opportunity to share their views on this agricultural action plan. They've been able to give their information through the survey, but they haven't been able to say what they think of this plan. So what I'd like to foreshadow is that should this motion not get up, I'll be moving a motion to defer this item to be able to hear community submissions at the June planning and community consultation meeting, with the decision to be made either at that meeting or at the June ordinary council meeting. And the decision to defer this item is also something that I know that Councillor Egan is very keen to see happen as well.
Thanks, Councillor Duffy. Is there any other councillors wanting to speak? Thanks, Councillor Stockman.
Thanks, Mayor. I believe this action plan needs to go to our next PCC meeting to give the community, in particular our valued rural community, chance to respond to the action plan. Voting for this motion without the final consultation goes against any inclusion we are supposed to stand for. To me, inclusion means inclusion, and discriminating against those that potentially may not go with one's agenda. Going to the PCC and allowing that final stage of consultation to happen won't delay this plan, so I can't see why we wouldn't do it.
Thank you, Councillor Stockman. Has everyone spoken? Yes. Okay, so I'm going to put... yes, right of reply.
Thank you. Yeah, look, just to address the points raised by Councillor Duffy and Councillor Stockman, I do understand why you would want to go back out to the community, even just via a PCC. I don't believe that's appropriate for this one. I think community consultation is important, but I also think it's important that we don't do false community consultation where there's little to no chance of actually being able to take on board what's been said. We did a huge survey. The results of that survey informed the work that we've done here. But at the end of the day, it was a research project. We researched agriculture in Nillumbik, and we've come up with an action plan and a set of viability maps based on that research. So we could go out to the community and ask for input on, do you agree with the research or not? But at the end of the day, that's the research, and these are the findings that came back. Any further consultation will most likely be stuff that we can't take on board, and people asking for things that can't be addressed through this plan, which really the plan itself is a tiny part of this project, and the biggest part is those viability maps, and those viability maps are based on facts and science. You can't consult on that. It wouldn't change anything. But the plan itself is based on a huge survey that we've done. Huge amount of community consultation's gone into that, and there really, I don't see there being much opportunity to modify it. So I don't want to waste the community's time and make it look like we're consulting when really we're not. So that's why I would. That's why I'm pushing the motion in its current form. But I do understand where you're coming from, and I understand your willingness to consult with the community. I think that's to be commended. So yeah, I commend this motion, but thank you for those arguments from Councillor Duffy and Councillor Stockman.
Before I put the motion to the vote, I also just want to point out too, the actions are around consider collaborative discussions and investigate opportunities and work with community. So in a way that is also actually doing consultation because it's saying work with certain community groups. So yeah, it's halfway between a PCC meeting and hearing from community and actually getting it through the actions as well. I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour of the alternate motion? All those against? Carried. Thank you. We now move on to Living and Learning Nillumbik Neighbourhood House Advisory Committee endorsement of terms of reference.
Yes, Mayor, I'm happy to move the motion that Council 1 endorses the new Living and Learning Nillumbik L&LN Neighbourhood House Advisory Committee terms of reference as per attachment 1. 2, endorses the commitments of the expression of interest process for a period of 3 weeks, seeking community members for the Living and Learning Neighbourhood House Advisory Committee. And 3, notes that council appointment of a new community members to the Living and Learning Neighbourhood House Advisory Committee will be sought at the 26th of July council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Stockman, thank you. Councillor Payne, do you wish to speak?
Just briefly to thank Corinne Nichols and the Community Services team for the great work they do, and of course Kobe Vermeulen, coordinator of the Living and Learning Network in Nillumbik. It's an important part of the community services, and it's something that we should thoroughly support, and I do, and I look forward to those putting their hand up to keep this important part of the community thriving.
Councillor Stockman?
Yes, Mayor, just to agree with Councillor Payne.
Any other councillors wishing to speak? Put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Now move to the Environment and Sustainability Advisory Committee 2022 to 24 membership recommendation. Councillor Ramcharan.
Yes, I'd like to move a slightly alternate motion. There we go. That Council 1 endorses the Youth Committee representative and the 11 candidates with the highest consolidated score as per attachment 2 for membership of the Nillumbik Environment and Sustainability Advisory Committee. Refer to confidential attachment 2. Whole list of applicants there who will be named afterwards, and then on the next slide. 2, acknowledges and thanks all community members who submitted applications for membership of the Environment and Sustainability Advisory Committee. 3, resolves that the panel assessment in attachment 2 remains confidential on the grounds specified in the definition of confidential information in section 3(1)(f) of the Local Government Act 2020. And 4, resolves that the successful applicants be named.
Do I have a seconder for the motion? Thanks, Councillor Duffy. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, just briefly, and of course I can't say much about the process because it's all confidential, but I have seen the full list of applicants and there were some really fantastic applications in there, so I'd like to thank everybody for applying and really putting in a huge amount of effort. Unfortunately, we can't choose everyone. We had more applications than positions available. It's never an easy job to assess those applications and come up with numbers and scores, so I thank officers for doing that work. And I really look forward to working with the new ESAC, whoever that ends up being. Thank you.
Councillor Duffy, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. With this advisory committee, the Environment and Sustainability Advisory Committee, this group of volunteers provide feedback and advice to Council on matters including climate action, biodiversity and land management, sustainable water management, waste management, pollution and the circular economy. So it's really quite a large remit, and we require people with a whole broad base of experience and skill. And no, I support Councillor Ramcharan's amendment to have the new committee selected based on the highest ratings in the allocations as assessed by council officers.
Any other councillors wishing to speak? Put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Move now to the endorsement of motions. Oh, sorry, we need to name the successful committee members.
So the successful committee members, Fika Vanderkamp is the youth committee representative, and then in alphabetical order by last name, the 11 top scoring applicants: Malcolm Cock, Doug Evans, Khan Frankie, John Huff, Vasundra Kanpal, Anne-Marie King, Kate McCracken, Andrew McMahon, Sue Rosenheim, Alan Thatcher, and Lindley Tozer. Congratulations to the successful applicants.
Thank you, and congratulations to all those 12 community members. All right, we now move on to the endorsement of motions to the Municipal Association of Victoria State Council meeting. Councillor Perkins?
Look, I'll read out the motion because it pretty well is self-explanatory, but the motion is that Council resolves to adopt the following 5 motions to the Municipal Association of Victoria State Council meeting to be held on 24th of June, and that is that the Municipal Association of Victoria advocate, perhaps just knock out that 2, where we see to advocate. So the Municipal Association of Victoria advocate the state government for increased mental health support. B, that the MAV advocate, knock out the 2 again, to the Commonwealth Government on behalf of all councils to recognise the significant role that local government has in the delivery of aged care services. That the MAV advocate for an increase in the state government contribution to maternal and child health programs. D, that the MAV advocate for increased financial increased financial support from state and Commonwealth governments to ensure that 3-year-old kindergarten reforms are successfully implemented. And E, that the MAV expands the focus of environmental, economic and social responsibility parameters as part of the criteria in awarding public tenders, and that Council resolves to lodge the motion's rationale as per attachment 2 to the MAV's State Council meeting to be held on the 24th of June 2022. So I move that motion as long as we can just make those few typo corrections. Thank you.
Do I have a seconder for this? Thanks, Councillor Stockman. Councillor Perkins, you want to speak?
Oh, look, there's probably no need. The rationale for the motions are there. They're fairly self-explanatory in the motion itself, but the rest of it's in the papers for the public or council to read through at your own leisure. Thank you.
Councillor Stockman, would you like to speak? Any other councillors? Thanks, Councillor Ramtran.
Thank you. And I think, as Councillor Perkins said, most of them are self-explanatory. Usually these motions advocate, so as you can see, A to D are all advocating to the state and Commonwealth governments for a range of different things, all of which are incredibly important. And I really hope that they listen to that because I think advocacy from local government is a very important thing. And it's something that can really make a difference if governments take that on board. Point E is, I guess, the odd one out there. So point E does not advocate to state or federal governments. It's actually a request of the MAV itself. So MAV provide a range of stock standard procurement services to councils. For example, our stationery is procured by MAV. We procure a supplier who then supplies stationery to council in the form of paper, pens, whatever. But we don't assess them ourselves. That's assessed by MAV, and they make a recommendation to us, which is really helpful to councils because it helps to bypass a lot of the hard work involved in tendering. But one thing that we're really interested in is sustainability and procurement, which is something that we passed a motion last year to actually begin developing a policy on that, which will eventually make its way to council. But we want to make sure that that's a holistic approach. So wherever we're procuring things from, we want to make sure that they are following that sustainability approach, focusing on environmental, economic and social responsibility. So that's what that one's about. And hopefully we'll be able to get some reassurance that when we do use MAV's fantastic procurement services, that they're following the same values that we hope to follow and that other councils hope to follow to really move towards that corporate social responsibility. Thank you.
Would any other councillors like to speak? No? I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. We'll now move to item 67 lot, reduced to 56 lot subdivision, removal and creation of an easement, removal of native vegetation and buildings and works to construct retaining walls and earthworks at 32 to 46 and 48 to 58 Collard Drive, Diamond Creek. Councillor Perkins.
Yeah, thank you. I've got an alternate motion. We'll pull that up on the screen. Look, certainly the community of Diamond Creek and broader Nillumbik would be happy that I'm moving a motion that does not change its position at VCAT hearing with respect to planning permit application 53/2020 for the land located at the contiguous 32 to 46 and 48 to 58 Collard Drive, Diamond Creek. So that's the motion.
Do I have a seconder for the motion? Thanks, Councillor Duffy. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, thank you. So, in the papers, it's very interesting reading, but the officer recommendation, for those that have read it, and I would encourage anyone listening to read it, the officer recommendation was to support the granting of a permit to actually reverse council's previous decision under delegation where officers refused this application. So new plans have been submitted that are a little bit better, but they're still shocking. They're still a long way from what I would like to see for this site, and indeed what the broader community and immediate neighbours would like to see for this site. It's a large site, the 4.7 hectares, originally came in as a 67 lot subdivision, removal and creation of easement, removal of all native vegetation and buildings, and works to construct retaining walls and earthworks in Collard Drive, Diamond Creek. This original application was lodged on the 20th of February in 2020, and it was refused early last year. And it was refused, and there's great celebration in the community. Unfortunately, this application falls in an area that's covered by development plan overlay, so there was no third-party appeal rights, so the public couldn't get actively involved in objecting to the application, but they certainly did get involved in signing an online petition. And the online petition garnered 7,713 signatures. People from Diamond Creek, from Nillumbik and wider Melbourne and Victoria, very concerned about what was proposed to happen here. So what happened was ultimately the officers refused it under some of the grounds I'll read out. The proposed subdivision layout is not respectful of the desired neighbourhood character sought in this location, is contrary to the requirements of clause 32.8 General Residential Zone and Nillumbik Planning Scheme. The proposal is not consistent with the subdivision pattern of the locality, as the proposed subdivision layout and lot size is not reflective of that of the locality required by clause 65.02 of the Nillumbik Planning Scheme. The new application really doesn't help much in that regard at all. What I believe should happen with planning applications is the closer you are to the activity centre, the more dense the development. This application is very close to the urban growth boundary. It couldn't sort of be any further away from the activity centre, but we've got some of the highest density of development. The pattern of subdivision along Collard Drive is totally inappropriate. The massive removal of trees, the loss of vegetation, totally flies in the face of our significant landscape overlay, which covers the whole, actually significant, that's environmental, it's an ESO, environmental significant overlay, which seeks to protect the vegetation in the area. So it's an improved plan, but it's still a shocking plan. I'll read out the change.org petition. The 7,713 supporters, when council refused this the first time, said, Nada Jones, who lodged the petition, 6th of January 2021, thank you all. Your support has meant that the Shire Council has rejected the planning application. It's rejected on environmental grounds, so your voice has been heard loud and clear. We have ended up with over 7,500 signatures and counting. This is a massive show of your commitment to ensuring our local environments remain green in Melbourne. This means that the Council will consider any future applications very carefully with regard to provisions for wildlife and native flora. Let's hope this becomes a precedent for future developments in the area and the wider metropolitan community. There will be future applications for this site, no doubt, but for now this land has been put up for resale as the developer can see the difficulty posed in meeting the stringent enforcement of environmental overlays. great outcome, team. Apparently the petition can be reopened for future applications if necessary. Congratulations all, a stunning victory. And that was 7,713 petitioners. So, you know, we have to keep faith with community. We have to keep faith with what the residents of Nillumbik expect. The majority live in the area and aren't developers, and it's the residents and the ratepayers of Nillumbik that I look to represent. So I won't be supporting this new plan. It's not much better than their old plan. So the status quo in terms of refusal for the plan and the grounds of refusal remain the same. If this motion gets through, that will be, the status quo will remain when council goes to VCAT, because we have been taking a VCAT on this one. Thank you.
Councillor Duffy, would you like to speak?
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to thank Councillor Perkins for his alternate motion. The motion as it was something that I was not going to be able to vote for. I agree with the points that he's made, and I strongly listen to the voices of the 7,713 people who signed the petition, and I remember the Facebook campaigns of the time back in January of last year. Things that concern me, and this is as a rookie councillor, not having had lots of planning experience in the past, one of the things that stood out to me with this subdivision is that the vegetation that was to be removed was able to be offset in another location in Victoria. So I would like to see that where there is vegetation being removed in Nillumbik for development, that the replacement of that vegetation actually occurs here in Nillumbik, because if we're having a biodiversity study and we're looking at all of these things about what is it that we love about where we live, why would we, on one hand, let that biodiversity be destroyed, only to be, put in a place where it enhances somewhere else? It actually doesn't come back to be something that we enjoy here, whether it's the human enjoyment or whether it's the wildlife and the animals and the birds, etc. So I don't know enough detail about why that's permitted. I believe it's something to do with the state government, but on a personal level, I just don't think it doesn't sit well with me. It kind of doesn't pass my pub test of, just cutting down a tree here is okay in Nillumbik if you go and plant it down at Mornington Peninsula. I'd like us to be having people replanting what's removed in our own backyard. So thank you, Councillor Perkins. I support what you've got to say and all of that. And I noticed that with this application, it refers to, a bushy sort of subdivision, and there's only a few blocks of this that actually would be a bushy subdivision, and the nature strip that is left, the nature reserve that's left for the community in the officer report says that it wouldn't be big enough to even have a playground on. So there's a lot that's to be said with this application, and I'm just listening to the community and supporting what you've said in this instance. So thank you for putting forward that alternate motion. I'm very happy to support it.
Would any other councillor like to speak? Thanks, Councillor Amstran.
Yes, I completely support Councillor Perkins on this one. I was certainly very uneasy when I read this in the meeting papers last week, and I wanted to have a chat to the other councillors about it, really just to get everybody's view. And I think it was quite clear after speaking to Councillor Perkins, and he's just made some very convincing points just now, that this really isn't an appropriate development for us to be letting through as a council. What happens when we make this decision is that the applicant will need to continue their appeal to VCAT. Now, they have swapped their papers at VCAT. What that means is they will not get the original outcome that they applied for. That is done and dusted. What we're considering here today, this subdivision that divides it into less lots, that is what VCAT is now considering. VCAT will not consider the original application. So usually with a planning application, you let the thing through, you let the thing through because you know that if they take it to VCAT, then they might get permission to do that without certain conditions that council is putting on. With this one, all that happens when we make this decision here is VCAT will go ahead and make their own decision on this. We're deferring the decision to VCAT. It's not like we're risking a worse outcome, because what we're considering here is exactly what VCAT would be considering. So I see absolutely no disadvantage to supporting this motion and allowing VCAT to make what I'm sure will be a thorough decision as to whether this planning permit should go through. And they very may well make that decision to let it through, but at least we'll know that it was thorough and done by VCAT. The result, if we supported the recommendation, would be that the planning application would be approved, and that would be the end of the journey. Because of the development plan overlay, that the single objector, who is the person who submitted the petition with over 7,000 signatures, so effectively 7,000 people who didn't want this to go ahead, they'll have no third-party appeal rights because of the development plan overlay. So that means it would never even go to VCAT. So I would much rather let VCAT make the decision, and that's why I'm supporting Councillor Perkins' motion. To touch on a point made by Councillor Duffy, I completely agree, Councillor Duffy. It doesn't pass the pub test with me either for those offsets to be purchased outside of the Shire. But the other big issue with offsets is that the whole idea behind them is no net loss, and I don't see how cutting a major tree down and replacing it with a few saplings and not guaranteeing that effort to make sure they grow, I wouldn't call that no net loss. So it is a system that needs reviewing. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ramtran. Would any other councillors like to speak to this? Thanks, Councillor Stockman.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll be supporting Councillor Perkins' motion as well, but I did want to point out a couple of things. That housing is a bit of an issue, and Councillor Perkins did say that there'd be more, he'd actually support higher development housing closer to the centre of the townships, but we have knocked those back as well. So I just want to, for future, look where that housing is going to be, and certainly it is important. But Councillor Perkins did point out some of the maps, and I've looked at them as well, the planning of this, and I just don't think it suits where it's going.
Mayor, can I just make a personal explanation? Because I'm not sure Councillor Stockman got that quite right.
Sure.
In that I wasn't saying I would support planning applications close to the activity centre. What I was saying is that's how the planning system works, and that's how plans are or applications are usually assessed, and that's written in our planning doctrine, that the highest intensity should be closest to the activity centre. That's what I was saying. I wasn't saying I'm going to support high intensity anywhere, but there is greater encouragement in the planning system for high intensity the closer you are to the activity centre. What should happen? It's like the CBD. It's, you have large masses of buildings right in the centre of the activity centre, and then the height and the intensity of development decreases the further you go out. So that was the point I was making, not saying that I would support high intensity or apartment buildings or anything in the activity centre of Diamond Creek. So just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors wishing to speak? Before I put it to the vote, I just wanted to say that Councillor Stockman does raise a good point around needing diverse housing, and we know that we have an ageing population where residents do want to downsize and stay within the community, but we don't want that to the detriment of our environment and the green wedge, so we need a balance. I don't feel that this is a balance. So I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour of the motion? Thank you. Carried unanimously. We'll now move to informal meetings of councillors, records 24th of May 2022. Councillor Stockman? Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move the motion to accept officers' recommendation that Council, in accordance with item 19 of Council's governance rules, meeting procedures, receives the informal meetings of Council's records attachment 1 for the meeting held, and as per the papers.
Thank you, Councillor Stockman. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Thanks, Councillor Perkins. Would you like to speak, Councillor Stockman?
No, thanks.
Okay. Councillor Perkins? Any other councillors? Thanks, Councillor Duffy.
Thank you. I'll say one thing about the meetings, that there was one meeting in particular You'll notice in the agenda and the papers, people can read this from home and they might be wondering what's going on. There was a meeting that was held, a councillor workshop about Australia Day, and in that meeting there were no decisions really made other than to say that we're looking at the format of the Australia Day ceremonies and what that will look like moving forward. One thing that I do have a problem with myself is that, you know, we have our citizenship awards ceremonies on a day that is causes pain and conflict to many people in Australia, because Australia Day is celebrated on January 26, which is the day of the first fleet arrival. So there's just a discussion being had as to what's the format moving forward for our Australia Day celebrations, just to make sense of what that meeting was, because it's in the agenda and I didn't want people to be confused. So I hope that that might clarify things, and I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Councillor Duffy. Councillor Perkins.
Just much along the same line, I would just like to make it clear that from my point of view, the changes or the proposed or possible changes to our Australia Day citizenship ceremony, for my reason, are trying to align our Australia Day awards, which are volunteer appreciation awards, really, where we promote volunteerism, to move that part of the ceremony to the National Volunteer Week. I don't see the connection that Natalie does. We're reaching the same, or Councillor Duffy does. I think we're coming to the same conclusion, but for different reasons. So, but that will be discussed, I'm sure, at a future council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors wishing to speak? Put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. We'll now move to tender of report contract 2122-05 loan borrowings 2021 to 2022.
Thank you, Mayor Eyre. I move the motion that Council 1 notes that the public tender process undertaken to establish the following contract has subsequently been cancelled due to lack of competitive offers from the market, and that the required borrowings will now be obtained via the Treasury Corporation of Victoria, TCV. Number 2122-059, title Loan Borrowings 2021-2022, term 7 years. 2, notes that the Finance Manager will commence negotiations with TCV to establish the required borrowings as per the adopted 2021-2022 budget. 3, authorises the Chief Financial Officer to finalise and execute the resulting contract documentation with TCV. And 4, advises all tenderers accordingly.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Thanks, Councillor Stockman. Councillor Payne?
Again, just wanted to commend the work at Vince Lombardi, Malika Secunda and Lance Clark for their work for this tender. The borrowing of the $7 million is part of our ongoing responsible financial position at Council to meet our obligations, including capping of the old Kangaroo Ground tip and ongoing federal stimulus opportunities. So I would like to thank the team for their work, and that's about it.
Any other councillors wishing to speak? Put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. We'll now move to tender a report contract 2021-007, landfill, environmental monitoring and maintenance and environmental auditor for closed landfill. Thanks, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, I'd like to move that Council 1 accepts the tenders submitted by the preferred tenderers for the schedule of rates disclosed in Attachment A and enter into the following contract. Number 2021-007, title Landfill Environmental Monitoring and Maintenance and Environmental Auditor for Closed Landfill, term 1st of July 2022 to the 30th of June 2027. Options term extensions up to the 30th of June 2032. 2, authorises the Director of Operations and Infrastructure to finalise and execute the contract documentation. 3, authorises the Director of Operations and Infrastructure to approve contract term extensions. 4, authorises the Director of Operations and Infrastructure to approve changes to operational requirements throughout the term of the contract. 5, advises all tenderers accordingly. 6, makes public the decision regarding this contract, but the tender evaluation report in attachment A remains confidential on the grounds specified in the definition of confidential information in section 3(1)(g) of the Local Government Act 2020. And 7, resolves that the preferred tenderers be named. Bit of a mouthful.
Thank you for that. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Thanks, Councillor Perkins.
Look, just briefly, this is something we have to do. It's really business as usual, and just making sure that we've ticked all the boxes in terms of getting a contractor to do that work. They'll be auditing our landfills for environmental purposes and just making sure that that's all safe and not posing a hazard to the general public or to the environment. So that's what this contract does. And I'm happy to support the officer's decision in awarding it to the preferred tenderers.
Thank you. Any other councillors wishing to speak? Okay, I put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. And we now list.
So I'd like to congratulate Service 1, SMEC Australia, and Service 2, Australian Environmental Auditors, and Tonkin and Taylor as well.
Thank you. Congratulations to those tenderers. All right, we now move on to lost where I'm at. Here we go. Tender report contract 2122-052 Bible Street traffic improvements.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move the motion as per the papers, please.
Do I have a seconder for the motion? Thanks, Councillor Perkins.
I would just like to thank the team, Yalmar Phillip, of course, Enrique Gutierrez, Lance Clark and Lawrence Sayers for the work that's about to happen in Bible Street, Eltham. We were lucky enough to receive $5 million from the Commonwealth Government's Urban Congestion Fund, and this money will be used to make parts of Eltham, and particularly Bible Street, safer, hopefully slower, and certainly safer for both pedestrians and driven traffic. The works will include raised intersection treatments, pedestrian crossing, curb works, line marking, signage and minor drainage improvements. And yes, I would like to thank the procurement team for finding a contractor to begin this important work.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Councillor Perkins, do you wish to speak? Any other councillors? No? Okay. I'd just like to say I'm looking forward to seeing this work beginning. There was an extensive community engagement done, and there was a lot of support for these treatments on Bible Street, so I'm looking forward to seeing them begin. I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously.
And I would like to congratulate the preferred tenderer, MJ Construction Group Proprietary Limited, for being the successful tenderer.
Thank you, and congratulations to them as well. All right, coming to nearer the end of our meeting. We do not have any notices of motions, no delegates' reports, no supplementary and urgent business, no confidential reports. So therefore, I close the meeting at what looks to me from this distance, 8:30 p.m. 8:28. Sorry, and my watch is flat, so I have. It looks, yeah, that's why I'm wearing glasses. Anyway, I wish everyone a good night, and we'll see you all here in 4 weeks. Thank you all for attending.